Hi, welcome back to yet another video. If you watched the last video, you now have my undying love. And if you're watching this video, same. I had a few things on my mind today that I wanted to chat about, if that's okay with you. You can't respond because you're watching a video, so here we go. I was wondering if you've ever felt stretched too thin in a relationship or felt disappointed in a relationship. Today I wanted to talk about healthy boundaries and go into a little bit more detail on surrounding yourself with good people that help you to thrive rather than just survive. Have you ever left a hangout where you just feel so much more tired and drained than when you entered the hangout? You're super excited to hang out with this person, and then leaving, you're like, oh my gosh, I just need to go to bed. I feel exhausted. And honestly, it's kind of that person. And then on the other hand, you have hangouts with people, and leaving that hangout, you're like, oh, I'm so energized and I feel like I could take on any of my world's problems, anything. I feel like I can do it. I feel limitless. So that to me is my internal compass, and it's telling me where there's a relationship that I have that's lacking and a relationship that I have that's thriving. It's showing me that this is a relationship, the one that I feel drained from, is not as life giving as it could be. And the relationship where I'm feeling charged up is a life giving relationship. I think that when relationships start to feel like they're taking more than they're giving, and it doesn't feel like there's this even exchange, we have to come to that realization, and we have to identify that, and we have to take some steps to change that, essentially. I know that it's been said, at least to me, maybe you've seen it online, that every 5 years it's really important to redefine relationships. Because if you think about it, how would you even relate to yourself 5 years ago? I feel like there's a lot of things that are kind of common, but you've grown so much in the last 5 years. You see the world differently than you saw it 5 years ago. I know for me, I listened to different music 5 years ago than I listen to now. The way that I respond to certain things is different than the way that I responded 5 years ago. And if I'm having this growth happen over 5 years, and my friend or this other person in this relationship is having the same thing going on, I can't relate to them the exact same way that I related to them 5 years ago. There has to be this measure of trying to further the relationship and constantly get to know each other. I think that a lot of times in our relationships, they become stagnant because we become stagnant in them. We stop being active in our relationships. We become too comfortable, and we almost take for granted our relationships. This person's been around for the last 5 years, so they're going to be around for another 5. I don't have to do anything to feed this relationship. But in reality, if you want to have a thriving, healthy relationship with friends or with a partner, you have to constantly be investing in that relationship. I know for me, another part of that internal compass is when I'm hanging out with someone and all we ever talk about is the past. It's cool to reminisce about the past and the good old times, but when that's all that we talk about, to me, the relationship is headed towards death, essentially. Because we're not even talking about things that are going on currently. We're not talking about the future. We're just looking back to an old time when the relationship was good. So now I need to go back and pinpoint when those things shifted so that I can revive the relationship or just allow it to be what it is and redefine it. I think it's super important to redefine our relationships constantly. And that's the point I was making about every 5 years, redefining relationships. For example, with my parents, before I moved out of the house, the way that I related to my mom, anything that my mom said, I should have, sometimes didn't always, but should have done and listened to and heeded whatever she had to say. She was the authority in the situation. 5 years after moving out, now I'm making my own decisions, and the way that we relate to each other doesn't compute in the same exact way. So we had to have a sit-down conversation and be like, hey, this is what I feel like our relationship is needing, and this is what I feel like is really good in our relationship. How can we fill these needs? And I let her tell me what she felt like she needed. She needed me to reach out to her. She needed me to talk to her because I was being a little rebellious butthole. You know, I'm gonna put myself out on the cross for anybody else. So you guys know I definitely am not the expert on this stuff, but this is just things that I've learned in my time that I'm hoping will help. But since redefining the relationship, we have been able to love each other better, be there for each other better, and like I can be her son and she can be my mom, And it was so important to redefine that relationship. And I think it's overlooked when it comes to our parents, because it's just like, oh, well, they birthed me. They're going to take care of me. If I have a financial need, they're going to, help me with this. They're going to do that. They're going to do that. But that's one of our our earliest relationships that we have are with our siblings and with our parents. And if we can't figure out how to keep those and keep them healthy, I think that that's going to affect all the other relationships that we have. And then we're going to be going to therapy. We're going to be going through all this anguish, and we're going to be trying to figure stuff out that if we would have just taken the time to do that with our core relationships, we probably would be in a better situation and have some tools to be able to figure this out. It's important to be self-reflective and self-aware, because I had to recognize that, like, me not reaching out to my parents because, I was setting a boundary that was an unhealthy boundary wasn't okay. And I had to bring people into that situation in order to recognize that for myself. Because a lot of times, like when you're a kid and you grow over a summer, like you're seeing yourself in the mirror every single day. So you're not recognizing how tall you're getting. But then when you see someone you haven't seen for a couple months, like, oh my gosh, you've grown so much. And then you recognize that. And I think that's why it's super important to have people in your life to point out these different things to you, good and bad. And being open to people critiquing, how you're conducting yourself in relationships. I think that since I've allowed people into my relationships and allowed them to speak into them, I have become so much more well-rounded in the relationships that I do have. I by no means am perfect. None of us are. But I'm better because of it. Because I have an outside perspective and not just my life experience and my frustration with this or whatever coming into play when I'm trying to figure things out. Another key when recognizing a deficiency in a relationship is intentionality. And another key to maintaining healthy relationship is intentionality. If I just hope and wish that things are going to get better, or hope and wish things are going to stay exactly the same in the good relationship, that's not going to happen. I have to bring some intent to the table. I have to fight for the relationship that I feel like is not doing as well as it could be. And I have to fight to continue to keep that other relationship healthy. Relationships are not just this formula that you put on things. Like, we're dealing with people. You're a person, you're an individual, I'm an individual. The way that I see things is different than the way that you see things. And it's so important to get to know people and bring intentionality into, like, what makes this person feel loved, what makes this person feel cared for, what makes this person feel, you fill in the blank, and bringing that to the table and constantly working at it. It's not going, like, once this becomes a normalcy for you, it's not going to feel so foreign. It's going to become normal to be active in your relationships instead of passive. And with intentionality, I think that also, number one, the fingers have to point at ourselves, and we have to be intentional with our relationship with ourselves. Because if I'm not functioning at 100%, I'm not going to be able to give my best to the people around me. And I think before going and trying to fix everything in these relationships and do all these things, I think self-reflection is super important, and recognizing, like, oh, hey, this is an area that I feel like I need to grow in, and I'm going to take some time to do so. And then I'm going to reapproach the situation. Because unfortunately, most times, whenever I'm having problems with people, I'm usually the problem. I change my mindset on something, or I change my view of something, it usually works itself out. And I do think there are scenarios where people are just being wild, and you do need to address those things. But that's not what I'm talking about right now. I'm just talking about taking inventory, seeing what it is that we can be doing better, because we only can control ourselves. I can't control everything around me. I have self-control though. So where is a deficiency that I'm feeling in a relationship? Okay, is that root in something that I'm doing? Okay, cool. Let me fix that. If that root's not in something I'm doing, oh, it's in a way that this person is acting. Cool, I've identified it, and now I can go and address it and bring intentionality into the relationship. Hey, when you said this, it made me feel this way. I know that wasn't what you meant to say or how you meant to come across, but it's how it made me feel. Can we talk about it? Having healthy confrontation is going to help grow your relationships and maintain the relationships that you have. With relationships that we feel like, for lack of a better way, I keep saying dying relationships, but that's just me being dramatic. It is a very curable issue. Realizing that there is an issue, recognizing, diagnosing, that is so important to it rather than being passive. Again, bringing intentionality into the relationship. If it's that person where you feel like you're always just talking about the past, perhaps enjoy talking about the past, but then redirect the conversation a little bit and be like, hey, so like what's been going on with you actually? Or what are you most excited about that's going to happen? These are the things that are going on with me actually. This is what I'm most excited about in the future. And even planning future trips and new experiences, because to me, a relationship that's only talking about the past is lacking new experience. It's lacking intentionality on both sides. And bringing that intentionality to the table, that person can take it or leave it, but at least you recognize where that relationship stands. It doesn't mean that I'm cutting this person off because they don't want to have new experiences with me. I just understand where they are in my ecosystem of friends. This is a person where if I just want to, have a good chat, reminisce, have a good time, that's what they can give me. But I'm not looking for more than that because I recognize what they can give me and what they're not able to give me. And that's going to help set me up for success in that relationship so that I don't have uncommunicated expectations on this person. And with having that conversation about like, hey, what's going on in the future, these different things, you're kind of setting a boundary in a way, because setting healthy boundaries is not meant to keep people out. It's actually meant to create the path to people loving you better. Healthy boundaries were never created to push people away. It's like, hey, this is how I receive love best, and this is how I feel valued best within these boundaries. And people can recognize these boundaries and be like, okay, cool. This is the pathway to making you feel this way and that way. And people that care about you and love you are going to see these things and adhere to these things so that they can love you well. Now, with healthy boundaries, there is a difference between healthy boundaries and control. Healthy boundaries is like putting out a board game and defining what the rules are of the game so that both parties can play and they can both succeed. Control is those rules are out there, but now I'm going to take this other person's turn and I'm going to move their piece on the board all the time. And this is exactly how I'm going to receive love and how I'm going to receive this and how I'm going to receive that. Healthy boundaries are just meant for people to be able to understand you better, but they're not meant for you to control the way that people are relating to you. And when setting healthy boundaries, especially if it's new to the relationship, I feel like it can be uncomfortable. Pretty uncomfy conversation like, hey, I know that it's been this way for this long, but now I'm recognizing that this way makes me feel a certain way. And I want to fix that so that I don't feel a way, And I think being pliable in the boundaries that we set that are not like hard boundaries is really important. Having that communication like, hey, when this certain thing happens, this is the way that I need you. Like, okay, let's get into a real example. For me, real example. Whenever I'm feeling frustrated about something, I need the person who's in the room seeing me be frustrated not to touch me because it's just going to make me more frustrated. But what they can do is ask me questions, and that's going to be helpful to me. But if they touch me, it's just going to set me off on this path that's not chill. And so by me putting these boundaries out there, if the relationship had been that way for a while to where they're like comforting me because that's how they receive love, they're like, oh, touch. I'm not a physical touch person. But if I haven't set that boundary and helped them to recognize that this is the way that I need help, then it's just going to cause miscommunication and frustration. And so by doing that, it's setting us both up for success so that I'm getting my needs met in that situation and they're able to fill that need for me. Communication is the key to a successful relationship, whether with friends or with a partner. That is a cliche, but cliches are cliche for a reason because they are true most of the time. Healthy boundaries are meant to keep people close, not to push them away. There may be a degree of overcorrection when it comes to implementing healthy boundaries in your relationships. And with that, I would highly advise bringing people that you love and that love you into that process. Like, hey, this person is making me feel this way when they do this. Other person who's a friend that I love and trust, this is the boundary I'm thinking about setting. What do you think? And they're like, okay, yeah, that makes total sense. Or, hey, that seems a little bit too extreme and too harsh. Maybe let's dial it back a bit. I think that having open communication with people before setting boundaries is going to be immensely helpful to you in being able to implement those boundaries. So I've had the communication with my friends who love and trust me and know me better than I know myself and can see things that I don't see. And so now I have the boundary and I'm going and having the conversation with somebody who I'm setting the boundary with, and we're communicating and understanding what needs to happen. We're communicating and understanding what the new boundary is, and we're working on that together, because I think it being a collaborative process, unless it's like a very, very hard boundary, I think if it's a collaborative process, it's easier for it to be upheld because you both have had your hands in it. By doing that, it helps you to become a more well-rounded person. So you're not just cutting people off and calling it healthy boundaries. Because I think the fruit of healthy boundaries is thriving relationships, not someone who's isolated and alone. Another thought that I had, and something that I brought up a couple times already, is uncommunicated expectations. I find that a large percentage of disappointment in relationships comes from uncommunicated expectation. If my friend is like, hey, I'm going to go get coffee before I come to pick you up before we hang out, and I really want a coffee, but I didn't tell them that I want a coffee, but I'm just expecting them to be thoughtful in that moment and bring me a coffee because they're grabbing coffee. And then when they come and they only have coffee for themselves, I can't be mad at them because that was an uncommunicated expectation. And I think that a lot of times we live that way with our emotions. I'm feeling low right now, but I don't want to tell anybody that I'm feeling low because I want them to notice me and I want them to be proactive in the relationship. And so now you're setting yourself up and leaving room for disappointment to creep in that relationship, which is just going to drive you apart. When I'm feeling low, I should be the person who's like, hey, friend who loves me, I'm feeling low right now. I think this is what I need. Can you do that for me? And they should be able to answer accordingly. But again, I have to take inventory and recognize my own needs before I can even communicate them so that this person can fill those needs. If I have not communicated a need and someone does not fulfill that need, I cannot be upset with them. If I have communicated a need within reason and that person doesn't fulfill that, well, that is a whole nother video. That is a whole nother time. Surrounding yourself with relationships that challenge you and give life to you and help you to grow as a person is so important. And if a relationship that you have isn't meeting that criteria, take that inventory of yourself, take that inventory of the relationship, and decide whether or not that is a journey that you want to go on. And communicate. I cannot communicate communication enough. It is so vital to everything. Make your needs known. Communicate your realistic expectations. Create boundaries that are healthy and bring people into your process. You were not meant to do life alone. That's why there are so many people on the planet. That's why there are so many people that love you and care about you. And all they want to do is love and care about you, but you have to make that known to them, what you need. But you have to know that for yourself first. I really hope that some of my experience and my story has added some tools to your tool belt. If you made it this far in the video, thank you. I'm told to tell you to like and subscribe. And this time, I'll up the ante. And I would venture to ask you if you would drop some comments below. What are some things that you've done or some tools that you have that have helped you have healthy, successful relationships? What are some things that you've done to set healthy boundaries? So until next time,